Welcome to Heidi Relationships. Today, we'll read some more stories from Reddit. But before we start, I would really appreciate if you could subscribe to the channel, like the video if you enjoyed it, and maybe leave a comment down below. That would help the channel a lot. Thank you very much in advance. The first one is titled, "My husband gave our spare room to his friend. I turned it into my office." This is the story about how my husband Seth's complete disregard for my boundaries led to some major changes in our marriage, and how turning a spare bedroom into my office became about so much more than just a workspace. I'm Aria, 34, and I've been married to Seth, 36, for 5 years. We bought our 3-bedroom house 2 years ago in a nice suburb of Portland. It was a stretch financially, but we both agreed having extra space would be worth it. One room for us, one for Seth's home gym, and one that we plan to eventually turn into a nursery once we started a family. I work as a technical writer for a software company. When COVID hit, like many others, I transitioned to working from home. At first, I worked from our dining room table, which was fine as a temporary solution, but as remote work became permanent, I started feeling the strain of not having a dedicated workspace. Papers everywhere, constant disruptions, and the inability to leave work at work since my office was literally where we ate dinner. Seth, on the other hand, works in construction management and was back on job sites within a few months. He didn't quite understand my struggles with working from home. "Just put on noise-canceling headphones," he'd say. Or, "The dining room table is plenty of space." Easy for him to say when he wasn't the one trying to conduct Zoom meetings with construction noise from his gym equipment in the background. I'd been dropping hints about converting the spare room into an office for months. Wouldn't it be nice if I had a door I could close during calls? Or maybe we could move some furniture around. Seth would always brush it off with vague comments about how we might need the room soon for other purposes, even though we'd agreed to wait a couple more years before trying for kids. And before anything else, you need to understand how Seth and I got here. The signs were always there. I just chose to ignore them because I was too focused on being the easygoing wife. Our early dating days were a whirlwind. Seth was spontaneous and fun, always planning surprise dates or last-minute weekend trips. I found it exciting at first, even when those surprises sometimes disrupted my work schedule. "Come on, babe," he'd say. "Live a little. Those technical manuals can wait." And usually I'd give in, rearranging my deadlines to accommodate his plans. It seemed romantic then. Now I realize it was the start of a pattern. The first real red flag came during our engagement. I'd spent months researching venues, creating spreadsheets comparing costs and amenities. Seth went golfing with his parents one weekend and came home beaming. "Great news," he announced. "Mom and Dad's country club has an opening for our wedding date. Dad already put down the deposit." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. But what about all the venues we were looking at? "This is so much better, and it means a lot to my parents. Plus, it's already done. No more stressing about decisions." That became his catchphrase. "It's already done." Like making decisions without me was doing me a favor. Even our house hunt showed these dynamics. I wanted something closer to downtown, with a dedicated office space since remote work was becoming more common in tech. Seth insisted on this suburb near his preferred construction sites. "Trust me," he said, "this area is going to boom in the next few years, and look at all this space. We could have a gym, a nursery." He wasn't wrong about the space, but the hour-long commute to my office took its toll. When COVID hit and my company went remote, Seth saw it as vindication. "See, now you don't have to commute at all. Everything worked out perfectly." What he didn't see was me struggling to maintain professional boundaries while working from our dining room. The countless times I had to apologize during video calls because he'd start his workout routine in the next room, music blasting. The way my productivity tanked because I could never fully separate work life from home life. "I don't get why you're so stressed," he'd say. "You're home all day? It should be more relaxing than going to an office." I tried explaining how remote work actually meant more meetings, more documentation, more need for focused time. But Seth, who spent his days actively moving around construction sites, couldn't relate to the demands of a desk job. My breaking point almost came last Christmas. I had a major project deadline on December 23rd, documenting a new software release that would launch in January. Seth, without asking, invited his entire family to stay with us for the whole Christmas week. "They'll be here from the 20th, he announced over dinner. "Mom's excited to cook Christmas dinner in our kitchen." I nearly choked on my pasta. "The 20th? Seth, I have that huge project due on the 23rd. He looked confused. "So? You can still work. They won't bother you." "Right. Because nothing says focused work environment, like your mother-in-law hovering around asking if you want cookies while you're trying to document complex technical specifications. I ended up working from a local coffee shop for 3 days straight, barely making my deadline. When I finally broke down crying from exhaustion, Seth seemed genuinely shocked. "Why didn't you tell me it was such a big deal?" he asked. "I did tell you, you just didn't listen." He hugged me then, promised to be more considerate. But old habits die hard, and within weeks, he was back to making decisions by himself about our shared life. Looking back, I should have put my foot down sooner. Should have established boundaries before they were trampled so thoroughly that turning our spare room into my office felt like an act of revolution rather than a simple logistics decision. But that's the thing about patterns in a relationship. They build up slowly, one small compromise at a time, until suddenly you're standing in your dining room watching your husband casually offer your spare room to his college buddy, and you realize something has to change, like the day that changed everything. I was in the middle of a particularly important video call with a client when Seth burst into the dining room, completely oblivious to my frantically waving at my laptop screen. "Hey babe, great news," he announced loudly. "Remember my buddy Steve from college? His lease is up next month and he's between places. I told him he could crash in our spare room for a while." I muted myself on the call and whispered urgently, "I'm in a meeting. We'll talk about this later." Seth just grinned and gave me a thumbs up before heading to the garage, apparently taking my response as agreement. That evening, I confronted him in the kitchen while he was grabbing a beer from the fridge. "We need to talk about Steve," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "Oh yeah, he's really excited about moving in. Says he'll probably only need the room for a couple months tops while he looks for a new place." I took a deep breath. "Seth, you didn't discuss this with me at all. You can't just offer our spare room to someone without talking to me first." He looked genuinely confused. "It's just Steve. You've met him at the barbecue last summer, remember? He's a great guy." "That's not the point. We're married. These decisions need to be made together." "Come on, Arya. It's not a big deal. The room's just sitting there empty anyway." "Actually," I said, "I've been wanting to turn that room into a home office. You know, I've been struggling working from the dining room." Seth waved his hand dismissively. "You're doing fine where you are. Steve really needs our help right now. His ex kicked him out, and he's having trouble finding an affordable place." "That sounds like Steve's problem, not ours," I replied. "And why was he kicked out?" Seth suddenly became very interested in his beer label. "Oh, just relationship stuff." I crossed my arms. "Seth," he sighed. "Okay, so maybe he fell behind on his share of the rent, and maybe he had some friends staying over too often, and maybe there was an incident with a motorcycle in the living room." A motorcycle in the living room? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "And you invited this person to live in our house without asking me?" "He's going through a rough patch. That's what friends are for, right?" I decided to try a different approach. "How long is this rough patch going to last? What if he can't find a place he can afford? What if he can't or won't pay rent to us?" "He said a couple of months max," Seth insisted. "And he'll totally chip in for utilities and stuff." "Like he chipped in for his ex's rent?" I asked pointedly. "That's different. Look, I already told him yes. I can't just take it back now. He's counting on us." I felt my temper rising. "No, you told him yes. I had no part in this decision. And now you're trying to make me feel guilty about it?" "You're being really unreasonable about this," Seth said, his voice taking on that patronizing tone that always sets my teeth on edge. "It's not like you're using the room anyway." "Dude, what do you mean there's no room?" Steve's voice carried clearly. "You said it was all set." I know, Seth replied, sounding uncomfortable. "There's been a situation." "A situation? My lease is up today, man. I don't have anywhere else to go. Maybe you could crash on my couch for a few days while we figure something out?" "Your couch? Are you kidding me? You promised me a room." Their voices got louder as they moved through the house. I could hear Steve demanding to see the room, followed by footsteps approaching my office door. Without knocking, they burst in. Steve's face turned red when he saw my setup. "This is bullshit. You said the room was empty." I looked up calmly from my computer. "Hi, Steve. I don't believe we've been properly introduced. I'm Arya, Seth's wife. The person he didn't bother to consult before offering you our spare room." Steve turned to Seth. "You didn't ask your wife first. What the hell, man?" "I didn't think it would be a problem," Seth protested. "Well, it is a problem," I said, standing up. "And while I sympathize with your situation, Steve, this room is now my office. I suggest you and Seth figure out alternative arrangements that don't involve my workspace." Steve threw up his hands. This is unbelievable. I turned down other options because you said this was a sure thing. He stormed out, with Seth trailing behind, making apologetic noises. I heard more arguing, then the sound of Steve's truck starting up and peeling out of our driveway. The silence that followed was deafening. Later that evening, Seth finally came to talk to me. I was still in my office, catching up on some work I'd fallen behind on during all the drama. He knocked, this time. Progress. Can we talk? He asked quietly. I gestured to the reading chair in the corner. He sat down, looking deflated. Steve's staying with another friend, he said. He's pretty mad at me. I can imagine. I really messed up, didn't I? I turned my chair to face him fully. Yes, you did. Not just with Steve, but with how you've been treating me and our marriage. He was quiet for a long moment, looking around the office. This looks really good in here. Professional. I can see why you wanted a proper workspace. Thank you, but this isn't just about the office, Seth. I know, he sighed. I've been thinking about what you said, about making decisions without consulting you. I didn't realize how often I did it until you listed those examples. And you were right. If you had invited someone to live here without asking me, I would have been really upset. So why did you think it was okay to do it to me? He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I recognize from whenever he's truly troubled. I guess I got too comfortable taking you for granted. You always went along with whatever I decided, so I stopped thinking about how it affected you. That's not okay, and I'm sorry. I appreciate the apology, I said, but I need to know things will actually change. They will, he promised. No more on my own decisions. From now on, we discuss everything that affects both of us, and... He gestured around the office. This space is yours. You've made it clear you need it for work, and I respect that. Over the next few weeks, things gradually improved. Seth made a visible effort to consult me on decisions, even small ones like what movie to watch or where to order takeout. He also helped me finish setting up my office, even building a custom bookshelf for my technical manuals. Steve eventually found his own place and got over his anger. He even apologized to me at a mutual friend's party, admitting that Seth should have checked with me first. Besides, he said, looking back, I was kind of taking advantage of Seth's generosity. Getting kicked out by my ex was a wake-up call that I needed to get my act together. As for my home office, it's become my favorite room in the house. Having a dedicated workspace has improved my productivity tremendously, and my company even featured my setup in their internal newsletter about remote work success stories. That's when something inside me snapped. 5 years of marriage had taught me that when Seth gets like this, convinced he's right and everyone else is being unreasonable, no amount of logical arguments will get through to him. He needed to learn about consequences. You're right, I said calmly. I haven't been using the room. Seth's face lit up, thinking he'd won. See? So, it's perfect for Steve. But I'm going to start using it, I continued. Tomorrow. What do you mean? I mean, I'm turning it into my home office. Tomorrow. Since you made a decision on your own about our spare room, I'm making one too. His face fell. You can't do that. Watch me. The next morning, I took a personal day from work and drove to IKEA. I bought a desk, a comfortable office chair, some shelving units, and various organizational supplies. When Seth left for work, the spare room was empty except for an old futon. When he came home, he found me sitting at my new desk, already set up with my laptop and dual monitors. The room looked amazing if I do say so myself. I'd arranged everything perfectly. Desk position to catch the natural light from the window, a small reading nook in the corner with a comfortable chair, and my degrees and professional certificates proudly displayed on the walls. I'd even added some plants and framed photos to make it feel more personal. Seth stood in the doorway, mouth agape. What? What did you do? I didn't even look up from my computer. I made a decision about our spare room, just like you did. But Steve is coming on Saturday. Where's he supposed to sleep? That sounds like a Steve problem, not an us problem, I replied, using his own logic against him. Maybe he can crash on your gym equipment. Arya, this isn't funny. I gave him my word. Finally, I turned to face him. And I gave you 5 years of considering your feelings and opinions in every decision we made about our home. You broke that trust when you offered our space to someone without consulting me. Actions have consequences, Seth. He stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle my new pictures on the wall. I heard him stomping around the house, making angry phone calls. I put on my noise-canceling headphones, which worked much better in a proper office setting, and got back to work. The next few days were tense. Seth alternated between trying to guilt trip me. Steve's really counting on us, making demands. Just move your office stuff to the dining room. And giving me the silent treatment. I stood my ground. On Friday night, he made one last attempt. "Arya, please," he said, following me into the kitchen as I made dinner. "Steve's going to be here tomorrow. He's already given notice at his old place. He has nowhere else to go." I put down the spatula and turned to face him. "Let me ask you something, Seth. If the situations were reversed, if I had invited a friend to live with us without asking you, would you be okay with that?" "That's different," he started to say. "How? How is it different?" He opened his mouth, then closed it again. "You know what I think?" I continued. "I think you're used to making decisions without considering my feelings, and you're upset because for once there are consequences." "That's not fair." "No? Remember last Thanksgiving when you invited your entire family to stay with us without asking me first? Or when you signed us up for that couple's cooking class I specifically said I didn't want to take? Or when you told your mom she could redecorate our guest bathroom as a surprise for me?" He had the grace to look somewhat ashamed. "Those were different situations." "Were they?" "Because I see a pattern of you making decisions that affect both of us without bothering to consult me, and each time I went along with it to keep the peace. Not this time." "So what am I supposed to tell Steve?" "The truth would be a good start, that you offered something that wasn't yours alone to offer, and now you have to deal with the consequences of that decision." Saturday morning came, and with it, Steve, pulling up in a beat-up pickup truck loaded with his belongings. I was in my office with the door closed, but I could hear everything through the walls. But more importantly, this incident became a turning point in our marriage. Sometimes it takes a dramatic stand to break unhealthy patterns, and I'm glad I finally found the courage to do it. Seth and I are communicating better than ever, and he's learned to respect my boundaries and include me in decisions that affect our shared life. Looking back, what started as a conflict over a spare room turned into an important lesson about respect, boundaries, and the importance of treating your partner as an equal. And yes, we're still planning to start a family eventually, but now we'll make that decision together, just like we should have been doing all along. As for that motorcycle in the living room story, I finally got the full version from Steve himself. But that's another story entirely, one I probably won't end up sharing here. Haha. Here are my thoughts about the story. Man, this story hit different for me, especially that part about her working from the dining room table during COVID. Like anyone who's ever had to balance laptop life with family life knows exactly what she's talking about. That feeling when you're trying to sound professional on a Zoom call while someone's blasting workout music in the background. I felt that in my soul. But what really got me heated was Seth's whole "it's already done" attitude. The way he kept making these massive decisions like it was some kind of favor to her. Bruh. That country club wedding venue thing was just the tip of the iceberg. Like, imagine thinking it's okay to just drop a deposit on a wedding venue without consulting your literal fiancé. The audacity. And don't even get me started on Steve. You just know he's that friend who never quite grew up, still living like he's in college while everyone else moved on. The motorcycle in the living room? I need that story like I need air. But the fact that Seth thought it was cool to invite this human chaos tornado into their house without even running it by his wife, that's some next level cluelessness. But also, that motorcycle story. OP, I beg of you. You need to follow up on what that was because, hello, you can't just drop that kind of detail and then leave without elaborating. But in any case, what makes this story so satisfying, though, isn't just Arya turning the spare room into her office, which was a boss move, by the way. It's how she finally stopped being the cool wife who goes along with everything to keep the peace. You could literally feel years of built-up frustration in that IKEA shopping spree. Sometimes you've got to throw down some Swedish furniture to make a point, you know what I mean? The part that really stuck with me was when she listed all those other times Seth had made decisions without her. The Thanksgiving guests, the cooking class, the mother-in-law redecorating their bathroom. Like, each of those things alone might seem small, but pile them all together and you've got a whole mountain of disrespect. It's death by 1,000 paper cuts, except the paper cuts are your husband constantly acting like your opinions don't matter. But here's what makes this story different from a lot of the ones we cover on this channel. You can tell Seth actually loved his wife. He was just being a complete idiot about it. He wasn't malicious, just monumentally clueless. And when she finally put her foot down, man actually listened and changed. That's rarer than a unicorn riding a shooting star. Also, can we appreciate how Arya handled this? No screaming matches, no throwing Steve's stuff out on the lawn, just calm, calculated office furnishing. That's what I call professional-grade pettiness. and I am here for it. Using IKEA as a weapon of marriage improvement? Absolutely legendary. The ending really brought it home, though. Like, yes, the office looks amazing and her work life improved, but the real win was fixing those communication issues in their marriage. Sometimes it takes a dramatic stand over a spare bedroom to make someone realize they've been taking their partner for granted. I swear, after reading stories like this, I'm convinced IKEA should start advertising their furniture as relationship counseling in flat pack form. Because sometimes you need more than couples therapy. Sometimes you need a new desk and the courage to use it. But anyways, guys, with this, we've reached the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe and like the video/comment if you enjoyed it. I'll see you again tomorrow.